and welcome back to The Right Ingredients, the podcast where we mix insights from recruitment, leadership, and speciality ingredients industry to help companies and candidates get hiring right. Today, I'm joined by someone who brings a completely fresh perspective to career conversations, Nadia Adan, founder of Guiding Women to Clarity, Confidence, and Alignment. Nadia helps women gain clarity in their direction, build confidence in their decisions, and align their careers with what truly matters to them. We'll be talking about how clarity and confidence influence career moves and how businesses in our industry can do more to attract and retain diverse talent through alignment and purpose. Nadia, welcome to The Right Ingredients. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Charlie. I'm really happy to be here.
Great. So let's start with the idea of clarity. When people come to you, what are they usually lacking clarity on, and how does that affect the way that they approach their careers?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And what I tend to find is most of the women that come to work with me are feeling a little bit lost or disconnected. And when I say that, they seem like they've achieved a lot on paper. You know, they have the title, they have potentially the flexibility, the paycheck that they want, but something feels a little bit off. And that can be quite difficult to figure out what's feeling off when, you know, that should life and everything is looking good on paper. And this leads them to not really know what's coming next or what they want next, because they might not know why they don't feel fulfilled where they currently are. And that's due to that lack of clarity that you've mentioned. And that makes it really hard to make confident decisions. When you don't know what you want, how can you make that next step? And what that leads, what I've found, it leads women to really be reacting to opportunities or staying where they are in that comfort zone instead of choosing that intentional next step. Almost like living by default, living on autopilot instead of living that life that you really want, which I call the should life. Living what looks good, you know, because I work at this company and I've been promoted 3 times in the past 5 years. I should be happy, even though it's not really lighting them up anymore. And it's hard to break away from that should life and gain that clarity if you don't have that clarity. Because you know, a lot of companies are really good at trapping us in golden handcuffs. You get your PTO, you have that security, right? That job security. It's difficult to make a decision into the unknown when you've got what you've been working towards. Even if that doesn't light you up anymore, it's hard to take that next step.
Yeah. In the world of recruitment, I often see candidates applying for roles that don't quite fit their long-term goals. I mean, from your perspective, what are some of the practical steps people can take to get clearer on what they really want from their next move?
Yeah, I think for me, and something that I always start with working is self-awareness. You have to really take the time to look at yourself, what your values are and what you want before you can have that clarity and take those intentional steps that we've been speaking about. And there's a really easy exercise that listeners can do to help them on their journey. So I'll share that with you if that's okay right now.
Yeah.
So we'll have simply take a look at your week. Just 1 week. You don't need to look at your whole life. You don't need to look at your whole career journey or this whole position. Just this past week. And ask yourself, what gave me energy? What drained me? Those 2 questions hold so many clues for listeners and for everybody, because they allow you to take time to reflect on what made you feel genuinely fulfilled and what was taking away that energy that you have, that drive. You can see what values light up, what values come up, and which values make you feel good, and which are a bit on the actually, I don't like this anymore. And this could be things that when you started, you loved. You know, we're always evolving, we're always changing. Just because you loved marketing or, you know, like social media, it can be possible that now that drains you a little bit. So be open to changes also when you're doing this exercise. So 2 lists: what gave me energy, what drained me. And take a moment at the end of the week, just write those down. Then you'll start noticing those patterns, and that's going to be a clue to what your next aligned move should be. And I really recommend everyone writing this down as opposed to just keeping it in your head. It really helps you process it more clearly. Um, Having things on paper is kind of like a reminder to you and your brain, your subconscious, which does a lot of the work that we don't realize is going on. Helps us see the opportunities, but also the barriers. And if you're just thinking about those bad things, they're going to keep coming up more. I do have one other thing that listeners could do, which is more designed to your current role. So the past exercise could be personal and professional life. This one is more for your role. And again, it's a list of what lights you up in your current role and asking yourself, can you do more of that? Maybe it's a question of having an honest conversation with your manager. I really love social media. I don't know why social media is on the brain right now. I really love social media. I want to do more of that. Is it possible? Yes. Okay, great. So then you're doing more in your job of what you like. If it's not possible, why not? Perhaps this role is no longer aligned with you. Again, having that in front of you is going to be able to give you an indication of whether you potentially need a role change or maybe it's a whole career change. If nothing's lighting you up, you might have outgrown that specific role and be time to move on to something else. So 2 really easy exercises. Well, I say easy, but reflecting sometimes can be hard, but not complicated in the sense that sit down with yourself, sit down with your thoughts, and just get clarity in that way is a great place to start, I would say.
Okay. You focused a lot on reflection there. I mean, do you find that clarity tends to come more from reflection or taking action and just learning as you go?
Honestly, I would say both. You have to do both. I would say that reflection gives you a direction, but taking that action gives you feedback. One thing I live by is we should never wait until we've got it all figured out because we never have it all figured out. So maybe never wait until you feel like you've got it all figured out. We learn by trying things. So that's where that action comes in. You know, we could take however long reflecting and saying, yeah, this is really what I want to do. And then you try it and actually it's not, which is fine. You know, we're learning by doing. You can think you really want to do something. And if you've never done it before, how do you know that you're going to love it? So that's again where, you know, you need to reflect, act, and what you reflect from acting will lead you to your next step. So clarity really grows through movement. And we're able to move when we take a moment to reflect of the direction we should go in and then act in it, on it. So both. Sorry to tell you, you can't pick one.
No, I see benefits and positives out of them both. So great answer. I think as well, confidence is another big one, particularly in industries like specialty ingredients where technical expertise and leadership roles can still be quite male dominated. So from your perspective, what do you think holds people back the most when it comes to confidence in their careers?
Honestly, the story we tell ourselves. Thoughts like, I'm not ready, or I need to prove this before I can do that, especially for women, as you said, in male-dominated industry, these beliefs can be, you know, really easy for us to think and become ingrained in our thinking. You know, we speak about imposter syndrome and all of these things. When we're the only woman in that industry, potentially, I'm not good enough, and comparing yourself to others becomes the default. And this default is a barrier because we start to believe that that's true. And as I mentioned before, our subconscious then starts looking for all of those things like, you're right, you're not ready, or you're right, you should be better at that, instead of looking at how far we've come and how much we've achieved. But confidence isn't about having no doubt. It's not about not being afraid. It's not about, getting rid of that inner critic. I don't believe in that. We will always have an inner critic, and our inner critic is there for a reason. But it's about how we speak with that inner critic and how we let it affect us. So it's about trusting in yourself, even when there's doubt. So it's really important to remember that the life that we live is a story that we're telling ourselves. So, quick example, we're both on this call today. We're both going to come away with very different experiences of the exact same moment because we're telling ourselves different stories about that exact same moment. So it's really that narrative. And, you can start by thinking about the language that you use. Something really small of, I'm not ready to do this. Okay. When you're telling yourself, I'm not ready to do this, again, that brain is, you're right, you're not ready. But just changing that to, I know that I will be able to do this, you then start looking for those opportunities. Your brain starts looking for, okay, we did this one step that is going to get us eventually to that. Well done, let's keep going. So it's those barriers, that self-talk, I think is what's holding us back mainly. And that self-talk really impacts our confidence. Your inner critic, again, it holds a purpose, but when it's so loud in your head, it can be the biggest barrier we have. So ourselves.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think what I see is confidence really needs to come out, especially in the recruitment space in that first interview. I mean, confidence often makes a huge difference, but it can be difficult to fake for a lot of people. They want to put themselves forward as confident in their abilities, confident that they can take on the role, whatever it may be, but at the same time, don't want to seem inauthentic. So what advice do you give to someone who wants to project confidence authentically without feeling like they're putting on an act, something that isn't them?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And what I would say is found that confidence really does come from alignment. That confidence comes when you're not pretending to be something that you're not. So when you feel grounded, when you're sure of who you are, and when I say when you're sure of who you are, it doesn't mean that, again, you don't have that doubt or you don't have those days when you're like, oh my God, what am I doing? It means that you have a very clear idea of what you stand for, what you believe in, your values, basically. So that confidence will be more natural to you because you're sure of what you're doing. So before an interview, for example, I would say, take a moment, don't just come on the interview, take a moment and connect with that why. Why do you want to interview here? Why do you want this job? What is your why? And remind yourself of even just one thing that you are genuinely proud of or genuinely passionate about before you get on that call. That's going to help you get back to that, okay, this is me. And it shifts your energy from trying to prove something to the other person to showing up as yourself. I don't really like the idea of faking it till you make it. This can be exhausting. And yeah, it can be draining. And if you're faking it, I mean, I always think if you have to fake it, and that company is not going to accept who you are, do you really want to be there? But again, it's about adjusting that story that we're telling ourselves, and that can make all the difference. And again, language that we're using, key. Saying, I choose to be here, or I choose to do this interview, I choose to do this role, instead of I have to be here, or I really need this job, otherwise what am I going to do? Completely changes your energy, which impacts your confidence when you're on that call.
Yeah, for sure. I see all of that. It reminds me of a quote I saw recently that I really liked. I posted it on my LinkedIn, in fact, which was, if you can establish you are worth the work you're about to put in on something, then you can go forever. But if you're chasing worth,
Absolutely.
you'll exhaust yourself before you even feel satisfied. And I think
100%.
that what you mentioned, ticking that into or relating that to what you just said about faking it till you make it. I think that knocks a nail on the head perfectly of if you want something, if you can establish your worth the work you're about to put in on something, whether it be an interview, be it a new project, whatever it may be, if you can do that, you can go on forever. But if you're chasing it and you don't feel that you're worth it, you'll exhaust yourself before you ever really get to where you want to get to.
Absolutely. And if you don't feel that you're worth it,
sorry,
I just wanted to say, if you don't feel that you're worth it, you're always going to be fighting that. So you're never going to make it. You're just going to be faking it the whole time.
Flip side, for women moving into senior or visible roles in industries like ours, what can the organizations do to support that confidence rather than what we can see is unintentionally undermine it?
What a huge question. Well, I'll start by saying I don't think there's one right answer. Definitely not one right answer. And every company will have different cultures, different ways of dealing with this. But ultimately, what I think makes the biggest difference is one, representation, not having that, that one woman or two women just because you need to meet the quota, but really because you want people there, and trust. I think those two things make a huge difference. When women see other women leading authentically, it gives them permission to do the same thing. It shows them that it's possible. It's like, oh, I can do that too. And again, that trust. So perhaps creating spaces where vulnerability is actually seen as a strength, not a bad thing, where asking questions is okay. Not someone's going to look down on you for asking, what does this mean? Or how can we do that? So really bringing honest, deep conversations into the workplace. And I think that kind of culture is what really builds confidence for men as well as for women. This is not a gender thing. Men need that just as much. They just, put up this masculine, probably faking it until they make it. Comes a bit easier to them. For me, personally, from my experience, it was really having a manager who I knew genuinely believed in me. She trusted me to deliver my work while also allowing me to explore other projects that were aligned with my skills and my interests. And that made all the difference for me. These two things, representation and trust that I mentioned, they only work if it's genuine. Again, if you're just trying to fill your quota, that is eventually going to be noticeable. You can try and hide it, but ultimately, these two things need to be genuine for them to work. Again, huge question. I'm sure there is a lot more that we can be doing.
We could dig into that. We could dig into a lot more there, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Through your work and the research that I did on you talk a lot about alignment. And I think that's something both candidates and employers can often overlook. So what does alignment mean to you in the context of career decisions?
Yeah, so for me, alignment, specifically for the workplace, is when you feel like the work that you're doing is some kind of expression of who you are. That could be your values, your energy, your lifestyle. They're all moving in the same direction. Something that you're passionate about, something that you truly believe in. As cliche as it sounds, something that you potentially don't feel like you're working. You wake up excited in the morning to do this. That's a indication that you're probably aligned with what you're doing. When you're out of alignment, probably feel like you're constantly pushing uphill. Even again, when everything looks right on paper, when that should life, I went to university, I got a great job, I've done this, you feel like you should be happy, but you're not. That's probably you're out of alignment. Alignment for me is intentional, passionate. Yeah, it is. It's confidence. We spoke about confidence at the beginning. You know what you're doing and you love what you're doing. You're not just living on autopilot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. From a recruitment point of view, and something that I've seen throughout my career in this industry is we often see great candidates that are perfect on paper for the role, that could take on the position quite easily, walk away simply because they don't feel a cultural fit, even when the role to them is also perfect on paper. How can people really tell if a company truly aligns with their values before even joining?
That's a great question. And what I would say is look beyond the job title.
Mm-hmm.
We can get caught in, captured by that shiny senior director of whatever. Look beyond that job title. And I would say really pay attention to how people communicate. Are they open? Are they kind? Are they straight to the point? Everyone has a different style of communication that they enjoy. So I would say, and LinkedIn is a really great place to do this because you can see where people work. You can see what kind of things they're posting. Is that aligned with you? Do you agree with what's going out? Not just what the company is posting, like that goes through however many comms people before it's allowed to be posted. What the employees of that company are posting about. That's a really easy thing that we all have access to. And in interviews, I would say, if you've decided, okay, I've done my research, I think this looks great, you get to interview stages, I would ask questions that go beyond the normal. What does success look like at this company and how is it celebrated? What happens if someone makes a mistake here? And you'll really learn a lot about that culture and if it matches to your values. I once had an interview, and it was a peer interview, so it wasn't a manager interviewing me. And she said to me, please take this time to ask me anything. You are interviewing us as much as we're interviewing you. And that took me by surprise. I had never heard anyone say that to me before in an interview. And I thought, you're absolutely right. And in that moment, I knew that I wanted to work at that company because of that one thing that she said. But she's right. And we should take that to every interview that we go in. Even if we're not given the opportunity outright by that person, you are interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you. You're about to spend a lot of your time there. So use that interview and, the LinkedIn and whatever you can to research that company to make sure they're the right space. The last thing you want to do is put all your energy into that, land a job, and within 3 weeks hate it.
Yeah. I love that you said that in terms of it's not a chance for them just to interview you. It's a chance for you to interview them. I love it because I tell candidates this all of the time before they go into any interviews that I've set them up for is exactly that. And I think it coming from the company is even more attractive in terms of really delving into the culture of the company, being able to understand you as a person, understanding what your drives are, what your motivation factors are. Absolutely everything, really getting an understanding of the culture of the company. Yeah, really, really good.
Yeah.
And leading on from that perfectly, I mean, what for companies listening to this, what can they do to present themselves more clearly and attract candidates who are aligned with their culture and their purpose?
Yeah, I would say be real, share honest stories about your people, about the challenges that you're facing, about how your values are actually lived out in the company. All companies have their shiny mottos and their shiny values, but how is that actually reflected in the day to day of the company? Because candidates can sense that authenticity, and alignment starts when you're honest. There's no point in advertising something that you aren't. It's going to be obvious very quickly, which is going to potentially affect your turnover. Terrible reflection of the company, not what you want. So starting off honest, and I think sharing your challenges is a great thing to start. It shows, like we spoke about before, that vulnerability to make everyone sharing your challenges is a great way to start with. Every company has challenges. Why are we going to pretend they don't? And it opens up that we're a place where we can have conversation. We're a place to learn. We're a place to grow. We're not trying to be perfect and shiny because that honestly doesn't exist. Again, if you're not real, those things are going to be obvious very quickly. another thing to remind companies listening, the talent pool talks. We, especially in your field, I'm sure that the talent pool is, I don't want to say limited, but there's a number of people that want to go into that kind of business. And those, okay, well, but they speak to each other. And, everyone knows I want to work for X company because they're fantastic. um, so that talent pool speaks to each other, and they know that X company is where everybody wants to work, and Y company is actually, they say that they're this, but the culture is terrible. You don't want to be that company. Exactly. People speak to each other, and a lot more than we think, especially with tools like LinkedIn, where you can just reach out to anybody. And I found that most people are willing to jump on a call with you and be honest about the situation at their company. So being honest, being true, and respecting your current employees just as much as the new ones that you're trying to attract.
Definitely. I like that. I like the point that you mentioned about showing the company, showing their, I wouldn't say weaknesses, but maybe their struggles, because it shows that we want to bring you in, but we're also struggling with X, Y, or Z. And that's a chance for the candidate who maybe is interviewing to be able to say, I can help there. That's an attractive point for both parties. And it also shows that the company isn't sitting on a pedestal, basically saying, why should we employ you? Why should you come work for us? It's a chance to be more human. And I think that would be attractive for definitely candidates joining a new company.
100%.
In my industry, the specialty ingredient space, we are seeing more focus on inclusion, diversity, and purpose, but it's still a very traditional environment. We see in more technical roles, such as flavorists, for example, that women are dominating the junior to mid-level, but struggling to break into more senior positions. For example, a recent study we undertook saw, I think, 61% of junior and mid-level flavorists globally were women, but only 31% in the senior master director level. What changes would you like to see in an industry like ours when it comes to helping people, especially women, build fulfilling and aligned careers?
It's a great question. I'd really love to see more focus on supporting the whole person, not just that professional side of them. Exactly. So confidence and, clarity don't come from just dominating in your professional life. Comes from, that self-awareness, emotional support, and a space for you to grow authentically. And you need to grow in all aspects of your life. And I would be interested to know why there's that such a big difference between those junior roles, those numbers of 62%, I think you said, down to 30, like half going into director. Is that because women are stepping away to have families? So do you need to have a better maternity leave? Do you need to support families in a greater way? Just things like that. And it could be, maternity is a bit of a complicated one because you don't want people going away forever, but is there a slow return to work? So we trust you to be able to do your job. For the first year that you're back, you can work 3 days a week, 4 days a week, half days, whatever it is. But that flexibility in showing the women in this case that you've mentioned, we're here for you in all aspects of your life. We understand that you have a life outside of work. We all do. So, it's not, oh, wow, I can't believe she has a life. Why is she not working all the time? And supporting that as well. And I think showing that you would attract a lot of talent. Women, particularly when they become mothers, they don't lose who they used to be. They don't lose their talent. If anything, they become more talented because they're multitasking, staying awake and like functioning and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I think looking at the person as a whole and not just as someone who works with them. And talking to the women that you have in your team. What's missing for you? What can we do? Having open conversations, I think, is a great place to start. Maybe it's a mentorship program that includes, that kind of inner work, that kind of honest work, especially in those traditional technical fields where maybe all your mentors are, men. So those junior women might not feel comfortable to be mentored by a senior director who's a man who's been in the industry for 20 years, and their paths do not look the same at all. So maybe, yeah, it's opening up mentorships to outside your company, something like that. That's an idea that came to mind just now.
We've looked at that as what companies can do, but for hiring managers listening, what's one thing that they could do differently tomorrow to help create that environment of clarity and confidence for their entire teams?
I would say ask better questions. And what I mean by that is, instead of just focusing on performance and checking in on, are we meeting our goals, etc., you can ask things like, where do you feel most energized? What is it that what were you most proud of this week? And that doesn't have to be performance related. Those kinds of conversations, and this can be in an interview as well as with your current employees, these kinds of conversations show genuine care, and it helps people reconnect to what drives them. Employees and prospective employees alike, when they're able to see that, wow, this is what really drives me, and they feel connected, they are going to perform better. So you don't need to ask me, have I met my goals? I mean, you can see that, right? It's in front of you. I'm sure everyone's tracking their goals. So we don't need to necessarily go over numbers, but maybe allowing me to remember that this X part of my job is really what I love, I'm going to outperform in that, if that makes sense. So sometimes just those right questions can unlock so much clarity for the manager and also for the employee. Just one caveat there. If it's not genuine, it can cause more harm than good. So really, if you don't care, don't ask. Because again, eventually that is going to come to light and that's going to cause more harm. So genuine conversations, asking better questions, asking for feedback yourself, how can we best work together? Yeah.
I think the genuine care, it comes through in the questions. And
Absolutely.
Something I always laugh at a little bit if I see on job descriptions where companies will say a family environment, we're a family, we're a team. That to me instantly screams inauthenticity. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying that is for all companies, but if I see that, I always think, let's take a moment there.
Yeah.
So you have to be authentic with the questions that you're asking and to understand the person. The best performers are happy. Simple as that.
Absolutely.
They're happy in what they do. They're happy in the environment that they're in, the tasks that they are given, the role that they hold. People that are not happy will slowly slide down a hill of despair in their roles. I think silent quitting is something that is picking up at the moment, where you see a lot of people will just go into their shell. And when they're working in an environment such as being remotely based, it's very easy. It's a lot easier to do than if you're going into an office every day. So understanding the person, understanding their needs, understanding what drives them and being authentic about it. I think that's a really good point, Nadia.
Yeah. And just before we move on that point, this is where what we spoke about at the beginning with the reflection of looking back on your last week, you're not always going to be happy. There may be a day where you're like, this is the worst job ever. That doesn't mean you need to quit, right? You're not always going to be happy. So using that time to reflect as, is this just a one-off situation, or is this dragging on and I'm actually unhappy, is really going to help you know, okay, I need a change, or this is just a season that I'm going through right now. Overall, I am happy here, so let's not do anything drastic. I think I just wanted to point that out because someone might be listening and be like, you know what, I've had a shit day and actually I'm unhappy. I'm resigning tomorrow. We don't want that happening. So we're not always happy, but yeah, absolutely. And, I'm guilty of silent quitting in my last job. I was very unhappy for a long time and I just did the absolute minimum. I went from a top performer to why am I here? So that's also really easy to do. And that's where those powerful questions from that manager is so important to be connected with your team and make sure that you're not losing people, because it's normally those top performers that quickly lose interest if they're not in the right space.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to put you on the spot here because I really liked the idea of reflection that you did at the start. So, and I kind of want another one. So if somebody's listening to this and they're at a crossroads, maybe unsure whether to stay in their role or move on, what's one simple exercise or reflection you'd recommend, give another one, I should say, to help them get clear on their next step?
Okay, I've got one for you. So it's called the what if exercise. So what you do is you write down, again, I'm a big fan of pen and paper. We process it much better in our brains. It gives us the opportunity to go back to it, to look at it, whatever we need to do. So you write on the top of the paper, for example, should I move on? I move on. And then you ask yourself 4 questions. So the first one is, what would happen if you did move on? What wouldn't happen if you did move on? And here's where it becomes a bit more complicated. What would happen if you didn't move on? And what wouldn't happen if you didn't move on? These are questions designed to scramble your brain. So it's really pushing you to look at that decision from different angles. There's no right or wrong here. It's really just about connecting with what comes up for you. So when you're going through these questions, it's important to notice what's coming up at each point. Sometimes, you might look at a question and just feel relief. Okay, so I would feel relief. Or it might be like, oh, I can't think about it. It might be frustrating for you to do that or for you to leave. Okay, why would it be frustrating? So then you can really dig deep into what's coming up, but it really helps you connect with what feels right to you instead of overthinking. We can get, I want to leave. You can spend a year, like I spent, like a year and a half feeling like I wanted to leave, overthinking it for a year and a half. That's a really long time to be thinking about that. And it's exhausting. I didn't have this exercise at the time. It would have been very helpful and I probably would have left much sooner. But yeah, this is scrambling your mind, looking at different angles, thinking about your emotions and practical stuff as well. If I leave without another job, I won't have an income for X amount of time. So it's practical, but also those emotions that come up. And what I'd really encourage listeners to do is when you think you've answered everything in that box, push yourself to think of at least 2 more things. That's when you're going to connect with your subconscious. And there is more that you can write. And that's when the real magic happens. Like, oh, I didn't even think of that. That's when, you get it all on paper. What would happen if you did? What would happen if you didn't? What wouldn't happen if you did? And what wouldn't happen if you didn't?
I think I've got
And
them
when
all.
you're trying to do that exercise, that what wouldn't happen if you didn't, you're like, what? That doesn't even make sense.
But it gets you thinking for sure. No, I like that one. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Finally, where can listeners find out more about your work and connect with you?
So you can connect with me on LinkedIn under my name, Nadia Adan. That's where I'm most active these days. I'm also on Instagram with @Grow with Nadia Adan. My website, nadiadan.com. And reach out. I love to have conversations with people. Love to find out where you are and just support your journey. I just created a couple of weeks ago a free resource guide, which actually this exercise that I just shared with you, the what if, is involved is in that guide. And that's something that I'm going to keep free. I'm very passionate about accessibility and, money not being a barrier for people to grow and have these reflective moments. Sometimes we don't know where to start. So yeah, that would be great. Intentional living. Reach out. Let's discuss what that means, because that means something different to everyone as well.
Yeah,
So
fantastic.
see what that means to you.
For anyone listening, I'll include Nadia's website and contact details in the episode notes, so don't worry about that. Nadia, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a really brilliant, insightful conversation. I think what stands out most is how clarity and confidence don't just help individuals, they also help companies make better hires and build stronger teams. When both sides are aligned, the results really, really do speak for themselves. So thank you for joining us. As I said, it's been a great conversation, and I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. Hopefully we can have another conversation soon.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you for everybody for tuning into The Right Ingredients. If you've enjoyed this episode, please follow or subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Nadia. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.